Welcome. I'm so glad you all came. I just want to make full disclosure that this presentation is focused on improvement science, implementation science, and long-range capacity building and scale-up of UDL as an initiative. My name is Kevin Schaefer. I'm a Director of Program Support with El Dorado County and Charter SELPAs. We support our LEAs and districts through special education services. And what we have found in many of our organizations is that they jump on the bandwagon and there's an initiative that they buy into, like Universal Design for Learning, like PBIS, restorative practices, and then the pendulum swings 2 or 3 years later. This presentation is focused on long-term implementation of an initiative, and Universal Design for Learning, if you were at the previous presentation, is an initiative that requires mindset change, as well as strategies and personal reflection around implementation and the way that our students learn. So with that, we will get started. I've created a Padlet. The Padlet web site is listed on the slide. And a Padlet, if you're not aware, is just kind of a resource housing place. So I've placed the presentation, all of the resources, the materials on the Padlet, as well as implementation science resources that we'll be going through today. And I'd like to start with a video. And this video is a different way of thinking about implementation. It's a different way of teams to work together to create innovative ideas. And it's out of San Francisco, and it's an organization called IDEO, I-D-E-O. And they do a lot of work with education. And this is how they problem solve using teams, but breaking down organizational structure in that the boss isn't always the person with all of the answers. So it's how they bring individuals from the organization with different areas of expertise into one problem solving think tank and come up with something better. So they don't create anything new. What they do is take products and create better products through the idea of design thinking. And it requires educational organizations to think differently about how they choose an innovation and then how they go through the stages of exploration, installation, initial implementation, and full implementation, which we'll get to. But I want you to just take notes as you watch the video on how they problem solve, how it's similar to the way your organization, your teams problem solve, and how it's different, okay? It's about 7 minutes long. And the product, the innovation that they're trying to improve upon is a shopping cart, okay? And they have 5 days to do it.
Tonight, the deep dive, one company's secret weapon for innovation. We went to IDEO, the product design folk, and said, take something old and familiar, like, say, the shopping cart, and completely redesign it for us in just 5 days. ABC News correspondent Jack Smith tells us what happened next.
9 in the morning, day one, and these people have a deadline to meet.
So welcome to the kickoff of the shopping cart project.
This is Palo Alto, California, in the heart of Silicon Valley, and these are designers at IDEO, probably the most influential product development firm in the world. IDEO has designed everything from high-tech medical equipment to the 25-foot mechanical whale in the movie Free Willy and the first computer mouse for Apple. Smith ski goggles, Nike sunglasses, NEC computer screens. Hundreds of products we take for granted.
The point is that we're not actually experts at any given area. You know, we're kind of experts on the process of how you design stuff. So we don't care if you give us a toothbrush, a toothpaste tube, a tractor, a space shuttle, you know, a chair. It's all the same to us. We want to figure out how to innovate by using our process, applying it.
Project leader is Peter Skillman, a 35-year-old Stanford engineer. Project leader because he's good with groups, not because of seniority. He's only been at IDEO for 6 years. The rest of the team is eclectic, but that's typical here. Whitney Mortimer, Harvard MBA. Peter Coughlin, linguist. Tom Kelly, Dave's brother, marketing expert. Jane Fulton-Suri, psychologist. Alex Kazaks, 26, a biology major, who's turned down medical school 3 times because he's having too much fun at IDEO. Safety emerges early as an important issue.
22,000 child injuries a year, which is, and so they're hospitalized injuries. I mean, there are many others.
And theft. It turns out a lot of carts are stolen. As the team works, it becomes clear there are no titles here, no permanent assignments.
And the other side says, gives us a lot of help, says, be safe. I'll give you a big red ball on a post, and that says you're a big guy. If you got a ball, you're a senior vice president. You know, what do I care? The desk, the red ball, it's all the same. In a very innovative culture, you can't have a kind of hierarchy of here's the boss and the next person down, the next person down, the next person down, because it's impossible that the boss is the one who's had the insightful experience with shopping carts. It's just not possible.
The team splits into groups to find out firsthand what the people who use, make, and repair shopping carts really think.
Okay, go.
The problem with the plastic cart is the wind catches it. Yeah. And these things have been clocked at 35 across the parking lot.
Oh, man, that's actually a pretty good point.
The trick is to find these real experts, and so that you can learn much more quickly than you could by just kind of doing it the normal way and trying to learn about it yourself.
From everything I read, these things aren't that safe either, you know? So probably the seat itself is going to have to be redesigned.
One of the interesting things for me is looking at how people really don't like to let go of the cart, except for the professional shopper, whose strategy is to leave the cart at various places.
3:30 in the afternoon, and the group is back at IDEO. There is no let-up.
Each team is going to demonstrate and communicate and share everything that they've learned today.
A shopping cart has been clocked at 35 miles an hour traveling through a parking lot in the wind.
We were in the store, 2 hours, and it was truly frightening just to see the kind of stuff going on.
You ought to designate some people to make damn sure that the store owner's point of view is represented.
After 9 straight hours, the team is tired. They call it a day.
So,
Everybody cool?
well, that's great. Thanks a lot. We had a great time today.
IDEO's mantra for innovation is written everywhere. One conversation at a time. Stay focused. Encourage wild ideas. Defer judgment. Build on the ideas of others.
That's the hardest thing for people to do, is to restrain themselves from criticizing an idea. So if anybody starts to nail an idea, they get the bell, you know.
The ideas pour out and are posted on the walls.
Oh, the blind, the privacy blind. Like when you're buying 6 cases of condoms, no one sees. If it doesn't nest, we don't have a solution.
Organized chaos. It's not organized. What it is it's focused chaos.
Vote with your Post-it, not with an idea that's cool, but with an idea that's cool and buildable. If it's too far out there and it can't be built in a day, then I don't think we should vote on it. Enlightened trial and error succeeds over the planning of lone genius.
Enlightened trial and error succeeds over the planning of the lone genius. If anything sums up IDEO's approach, that is it. Worried that the team is drifting, what can only be called a group of self-appointed adults under Dave Kelly holds an informal side session.
4 or 5 teams. 4 or 5 teams, and we give each team a need area. It becomes very autocratic for a very short period of time in defining what things people are going to work on.
If you don't work under time constraints, you could never get anything done, because it's a messy process and go on forever.
Back at the shop, it is 6 o'clock, and the 4 mock-ups are ready for showing.
Baskets also can be, if you think you will have more volume, baskets can be put in.
A modular shopping cart you pile hand baskets onto. A high-tech cart that gets you through the traffic jam at checkout.
That you could mount a scanner on the shopping cart so that you, as the customer, as you pull it off the shelf, would scan each item.
One that's built around child safety, and another that lets shoppers talk to the supermarket staff remotely.
Yeah, where can I find a yogurt?
But the adults, again, decide more work needs to be done before the mock-ups can be combined into one last prototype.
Why don't we have all the carts come up here for a second?
I think you take a piece of each one of these ideas and kind of back it off a little bit and then put it in the design.
The design is still not there. But there's another motto at IDEO: fail often in order to succeed sooner. And some of the team will be up half the night trying to put together a design that finally does work.
Good.
There it is! So we took the best elements out of each prototype.
The cart, which is designed to cost about the same as today's carts, is different in every other way.
What do you think?
Well, I'm very proud of the team. I think it's great.
Does this work for you?
Works for me great. It's also beautiful.
The cart's wheels turn 90 degrees so it can move sideways. No more lifting up the rear in a tight spot. And you shop in a totally different way. The bags are hung on hooks on the cart's frame. Remember, there is no basket here.
At first, I was a little shocked, but I think you have some fantastic ideas here. It needs a little refining, but I think that it's great. I mean, we would want them.
She also gave us some really good comments about how we can make this thing better.
A lot of hours. Also, an open mind, a boss who demands fresh ideas be quirky and clash with his, a belief that chaos can be constructive, and teamwork. A great deal of teamwork. And these are the recipe for how innovation takes place. This is Jack Smith for Nightline in Palo Alto, California.
So what did you notice about the process they went through in order to innovate? So they leveled the hierarchy in order to get to the best product. The other thing that I noticed was that where did they go first? They went to the user. They went to those that work with shopping carts. They went to shoppers, they went to grocery store personnel, and they wanted to get their thoughts, because we can't make decisions around choosing an innovation that we think is going to work for those on the other end, those that'll use it. So in education, we're looking at teachers and students and parents as the users. That if we don't do empathy interviews initially to say, what is your experience with this innovation that we're trying to implement? So we're trying to get the perspective of those that use or will use this new innovation, because we're talking about a change process. So in education, to relate back to the video, the shopping cart is improved instruction. So in our district, there is some indication that there's a need for change. So it could be data, it could be conversations with parents to improve parent engagement. So there's a need for change identified. What happens next is we try to figure out, we explore how we're going to solve that problem. So in the exploration stage of this process, we have to figure out the best way, the best initiative or innovation that will meet the needs of our students, teachers, and parents. And the process that we use to do that would be empathy interviews, research. What does the evidence show? And what I want to be really clear on is that we could identify an evidence-based initiative. That does not mean that it's going to be successful for our population. So there has to be a mirror effect, that whatever that innovation's research says, does it mirror our population to meet their needs? So that's a big piece to this process. I also love the quote, enlightened trial and error succeeds over the planning of the lone genius. And how many decisions are made in isolation and rolled out district-wide or organization-wide, and it dies a slow death over a couple years, and then we start something new, if it even lasts that long. So what we're looking at, how we come together, how we team, how we collaborate, how we develop our implementation strategy over time, so that we don't have that pendulum swinging every year, that we stay on the same track. In order to do that, we have to front load our work to ensure that it is the innovation, that we're not going to change every couple of years, but we're going to continue to innovate and move forward, because it reflects our beliefs as an organization. Shared responsibility and self-reflection is a place to start. Shared responsibility means that if we are looking for an innovation for our students with disabilities, then that means we also have to share that responsibility with general education teachers, general education site administrators, district office. It's not a lone initiative in a silo for a specific group of students. So shared responsibility across the organization. And we're looking at self-reflection. What are our beliefs? What are our missions? What is our vision? A couple resources. The first is a book by the guru of everything UDL, Katie Novak, Universally Designed Leadership. And this talks specifically how we implement anything, how we communicate through the lens of universal design for learning. So this is focused on universal design for learning principles for leaders and adults within the educational system, using the idea of how we engage our audiences and our stakeholders, how we represent information so that everybody has an understanding of what we're trying to do, and how we allow for feedback from those that will be indicated by the implementation. The other is actually an implementation website for UDL. So the National Center on Universal Design for Learning is another website similar to CAST, and they're actually linked. Sometimes you don't know if you're going from one to the other, if you're on CAST or you're on the National Center on Universal Design for Learning. But you'll see that there's a tab. It's Implementation, Be the Change. There are videos. We'll actually listen to an audio in just a minute of an organization that has gone through the implementation of UDL specifically. But there's all kinds of resources that if you're looking for implementation, sustainable implementation, then this would be the place to go. Right? And you'll see this framework, and this is the implementation framework specific to Universal Design for Learning. So like I said earlier, there's an identified need for change. And then these are stages, and you'll see these similar stages when we talk about implementation science later, but the stages begin with an exploration. We are going to explore all of the options that will improve instruction or improve behavior within our organization. So we've identified that there's a need, we are exploring, and then we're preparing the system. This is also called the installation stage. And this is the stage that usually we miss. We explore, and then we purchase, and then we roll out. If the structures aren't in place, if the drivers aren't identified and put in place prior to rollout, that's where it becomes a short-lived initiative, because we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the training and the coaching and the administrative facilitation. We don't have all of those drivers in place that will allow for sustainability prior to anyone ever experiencing the innovation. Then we integrate it. What are we doing already that this connects to? So we're not implementing a siloed initiative. We are implementing an initiative that integrates into what we're already doing. How do we scale it? If our test of change is small, one classroom, one grade level, one school site, how do we then create an understanding of what is necessary to be successful with implementation, and then how do we scale it up across a larger audience? And that's our test of change. And how do we make the test of change wider reaching? If it benefits the small group, what do we need to do to benefit a larger group? How do we optimize? How do we get the bang for our buck? How do we continue making it a focus? How do we continue to scale up? And then, as if you were in the presentation earlier, we're always moving toward expert learning, whether it's a student or whether it is the implementation team. How do we create expert learning, expert knowledge to continue the process of capacity building, scale up, and innovation? So this is kind of the UDL graphic. I'll show you another graphic when we get into NERN implementation science. So now we're going to listen to a district that has actually gone through the implementation process of UDL, and they'll talk about what they needed to do and how it aligned with their core beliefs. And this is from the implementation website that I just showed you for the UDL Center.
Well, I think the impetus to looking at the principles of UDL really took a leap forward in the district when Bill Jensen became Director of Secondary Education and Karen Garrity became Director of Elementary Education. And the three of us were looking at how to improve classroom instruction. We'd looked at test scores, we've looked at other kinds of student data, and what we quickly determined was that our sort of inclusionary approach to working with kids meant that almost all of our students were in general ed classrooms for almost all of the instructional day. And that by taking maybe a traditional approach of adding on stuff, adding on special ed services that were outside the classroom and doing things like that, really wasn't going to have a significant impact on student learning, because our students predominantly were spending their time in general ed classrooms. So we thought, what can we do to improve our core instruction and our core curriculum? And as we started to learn more about UDL, we really felt like that put a vocabulary with our beliefs and what we thought were some of the practices we were seeing in classrooms that we would call pockets of excellence. So as we started to learn more and became involved with the Patents Project, which is a state project in Indiana, we thought this seems to be a perfect fit to our belief system. And how do we sort of make that contagious and spread it across the districts? Because just having pockets of excellence wasn't good enough, because that doesn't hit all kids. We really wanted to make it systemic. That's kind of the impetus to our focus on UDL, and all our other practices, inclusion and small learning communities and senior projects and all those other pieces really fall under the principles of UDL. And so it gave us a way to talk about things we were doing, and it gave us, if you will, an umbrella that really connected all our initiatives. And
so that idea of, and I'll go back, that idea of integrate, that message came through in what they were talking about. How does it integrate, or how does it relate back to our mission, our vision, and other priorities that we've identified? So the idea of senior projects. UDL is that initiative that overarches senior projects. What about inclusion? If we have a priority or a mission or a vision around inclusion of students with disabilities, how does UDL then fit into that? So we're looking at something that's not siloed, but integrated throughout our system. Any other comments about that?
Just the part about, it's like the umbrella, the overarching umbrella and everything that falls in place within, like you said, the senior projects, it's that the inclusion, it's the umbrella. It wasn't anything new. It was just like, let's focus on it and work on it. Mm-hmm. I thought that was interesting.
Well, and it could be UDL, it could be PBIS, yes. It could be restorative practices. How does that then infiltrate, for lack of a better term, how does it infiltrate what we're already doing, and how does that relate back to our mission and vision? So if we believe that all students can learn in a general education environment, we believe in inclusion, then do we focus on special education services, or do we focus, like they did, on core instruction, tier 1 level instruction? How do we improve that for all students to be included, as opposed to something different and separate? So we talked a little bit about the change process, and that's the difficulty with this implementation of any initiative. Not UDL specifically, but the change process is really, really difficult for a lot of people. And that's going to be one of the first things that you have to deal with when you install and you do an initial implementation. Some people are resistant to change, some people accept change. How you think about implementation prior to the rollout, that people will be experiencing the initiative for the first time, how you prepare the system to make sure that that rollout is as smooth as possible, that teachers have what they need. And I want to be really clear that when we talk about implementation science or improvement science, it is to ensure teachers have what they need in terms of resources and knowledge and support in order to make a difference for students. So the ultimate goal is, how do we improve outcomes for students? What we're focusing on is creating a system that supports the teachers in the support of the students. It's very teacher support, it's very teacher, it's a teacher perspective that I want to make sure that we get across. And this is called the change matrix, which kind of, it changed my perspective of the change process and what needs to be put in place in order for smooth change. And if you don't have smooth change, it at least gives you a framework for discussing what might be going wrong. So the change matrix is actually made up of trust, vision, skills, resources, payoff, and action plan, which leads to positive change. If any of these components are missing, you will end up with an issue that I'm going to show you, such as sabotage. The system, or those in the system, will sabotage the initiative or the change process if there is a lack of trust. If there is no trust, then I'm not feeling a part of the process, and I don't trust you to do what I expect you to do, or the system would expect you to do. So if we have a lack or missing trust, it could result in the change process as being sabotaged. If there's a lack of vision, the whole system doesn't know where we're going, there's confusion. People are going in all different directions and closing their classroom doors and doing what they want, okay? If there's a lack of skill, if I don't have the skill to understand or implement UDL or PBIS or restorative practices, it's going to create anxiety in the system. If I don't have the resources I need, have you ever talked to a teacher who doesn't have the resources that they need? I've seen on the news. They don't have the resources they need, they're going to be angry. If any of these components are the result of our change process, it's going to break down. If we don't understand what the payoff is, if we don't have the payoff that is commensurate with the change expectations, then we're going to have sporadic change. Some will buy in and some won't. If we haven't developed an action plan, if there's no action plan in place, then we're just going to do false starts and go back to the beginning, false start, back to the beginning. We have to have a long-range action plan that includes vision to avoid false starts. Kind of cool, right? And if any, it's not a bad thing if any of these are missing. It's just a way to identify, we don't have a clear vision for how we're going to implement UDL. Then we had better figure out what that is. It's a way to identify what needs to be put in place prior to rollout. And there's a push in California. It's called multi-tiered system of support. So I just wanted to make sure that I talked about the difference, because there's confusion between MTSS, RTI, and implementation science, how they all fit together. So MTSS, and I think there's confusion with the name, multi-tiered system of support. There's tiers involved. We also have RTI, which also has tiers involved. There's confusion that, are they the same thing? Are they different from each other? If they're different from each other, then how are they different? So my best way of explaining it is that RTI is response to instruction and intervention, RTI squared. It's response. It's how we respond once we notice that students are not being successful in those three tiers. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. It's how we respond. It's how we move through. It's how we create more intensive groups, smaller groups, specific instructional strategies, curriculum, etc. MTSS surrounds those tiers. MTSS says that we have to have certain things in place to support students who are moving up and down through those tiers. So do we have professional learning in place? Professional learning beyond training. Does it move into coaching? What do our hiring practices look like? How are our administrators able to support our teachers? What types of leadership practices do we value? And are we flexible between adaptive leadership and technical leadership responses? So MTSS is a broad, overarching structural, and here's the key word, preventative. So it's a preventative focus to ensure that the system is set up such that we are able to respond to students being successful and not being successful within that tiered system of support. Implementation science is the mindset and the process that we go through to ensure that those structures are in place. And we're going to talk a little bit more about implementation science. It's really the starting point to identify what those initiatives are going to be that we're going to put in place through the MTSS preventative mindset that will then impact students within that tiered system. Questions? And I just wanted to make sure that you had a definition of MTSS. Go ahead.
Implementation of science, so is that under the umbrella of MTSS?
It's actually our mindset for putting a multi-tiered system structure in place. So I will go through the 5 frameworks of implementation science, and then that'll connect to MTSS, which includes RTI. So that's kind of the framework as we see it, that MTSS is the structures that are put in place. MTSS is how we put them in place. RTI is the response to those structures put in place. Okay? So just a little bit about the California MTSS framework. It aligns resources and supports. That's your integration piece. It connects all of them. How does PBIS, Universal Design for Learning, restorative practices, differentiated instruction, how does it all fit together? How do we make sense of it? It's also an educational system of change, continuously focused on overall school improvement. So it's overall district, school, classroom improvement. Stronger goal of prevention that we talked about. RTI is response. MTSS is prevention. And I can't stress this enough. Focused on making sure teachers have what they need. How do we support teachers? Okay. Just some essential concepts. I wanted you to understand the differences and the similarities between MTSS and RTI. Comprehensive, preventative, most commonly associated with academic needs. Now we're looking more and more at academic and behavioral and social emotional, and how to focus on students with or suspected of having disabilities. So the mindset of RTI has been, how do we get kids through the tiers to actually get to the referral for special education? Actually, the focus of MTSS and RTI is working students down the tiers. You want students in that tier 1 level of support. If they're going up, what structures do we need to put in place to make sure that they go down the tiers? And then what they both have a focus on. Problem-solving process, continuum of supports, database decision-making, prevention, teaming structures. I also want to call to your attention the SWIFT organization. Is everybody familiar with SWIFT? So California has put $40 million into MTSS rollout across the state. They're just starting the 3rd cohort. And the Orange County Department of Ed, Butte County, and SWIFT are the 3 organizations that are working on that implementation. So like I said, they're starting into their 3rd cohort. I do have a couple kind of different frameworks that SWIFT is putting out through the SUMS grant, which is the California MTSS grant. This is their idea of what RTI looks like. So take a minute and kind of look at it. So here's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So that pretty much looks the same. It's not a triangle anymore, but there is a thread running through that UDL. It differentiated and integrated in each of those tiers. Okay? So even the MTSS SUMS grant in California has a focus on UDL. It's differentiated for a variety of students, and it's integrated within other initiatives. Okay? There are also, they have really amazing resources. This is one of them. This is how they define MTSS. So a multi-tiered support, there has to be administrative leadership, integrated educational framework, family and community engagement, and inclusive policy structures and practice. And then they've broken that out into a placement. These are the components of each one of those areas. So it's all there for you. Okay, and this is where California is going. And on the SWIFT page, just a ton of information. Are you participating in the SUNS grant? Are you in cohort 1, 2, 3? I believe it's 2. Okay, so you've been through a year. Yes. Okay, how have you done with it? Yeah, it's interesting. They have what's called, I just want to draw your attention to the FIA, which is a way to kind of take an inventory of where you are in the implementation process. They also have great placemats. They also have a fillable resource. So really great resources, and that's the website. So I want to move, so the MTSS SUMS grant, SWIFT, Orange County, Butte, they've based their implementation on implementation science. So that's what we're going to go through, even though it's not called out specifically like we're going to talk about it today. It's integrated, and it was part of the design initially of the SUMS grant. So this will kind of give you a little bit of background information. You can find all of these resources on NIRN, N-I-R-N, the National Implementation Research Network. They have awesome information. I'll show you a couple of the resources. You actually have one in your packet. And this is their formula for success. You have an effective intervention. This is your innovation. That's your UDL, your PBIS, et cetera. You have an effective implementation plan, design. You've created enabling contexts. An enabling context or hospitable environment is that you've created across your organization at every level a context that enables the initiative to reach those for whom it was developed, the students. And then that's your result. Okay, so this is just the overarching formula for success. And I love this quote. The significant investment in attempts to improve education will be worth it if it helps further the education of students and benefit their families and communities. So in the NIRN Implementation Science Framework, there are 5. So here they are, and then we'll go through each one. So the 5 implementation frameworks, you have to have an improvement team. You have to make sure those making the decisions have the information, knowledge, and experience that they need to do that. This is in the video. Remember, they leveled the playing field. It wasn't always the boss. This is your team. Who did you pull together, and is it the right people? Do they work together as a team? Do they know how to collaborate? Could be the right people with the right knowledge and expertise and skill, but if they don't know how to collaborate, not going to work. Usable innovation, that is your UDL, your PBIS. It's the thing. It's the what. And then you have 5 stages. Sometimes there's 6, sometimes there's 7. But the implementation stages are what you go through in order to have an effective implementation. The drivers are the structures, what we put in place to make sure the thing is implemented. And then the continuous improvement cycles, which is usually PDSA, plan, do, study, act, is how we move through the stages. These are the 5 implementation frameworks that will assist in ensuring we have a sustainable implementation of our usable innovation. Questions about this? So it's okay? So here's the visual that I've created. We have a present situation, right? It's where we are. But we've decided that we need to make a change. We want to move. There's movement here. So what we're doing is trying to close the gap to a desired situation. So we want to move from here to there. How we do that is implementation science. So we start with 4 stages. Okay, we talked about the stages being one of the frameworks. The first stage is exploration. That's what they were doing when they went out and did empathy interviews with the shopping cart. They're exploring. What do we need to change? What do we need to do? What do we need to put in place? Once we figured out that we do want to implement, what do we need to put in place system-wide? What structures do we need to put in place to make sure that this initiative or innovation is successful? The initial implementation is the first time the users experience it. So you've done all of this work prior to anyone experiencing it. This is your rollout. And then full implementation is when that usable innovation is actually put in place and being successful across the organization. What you don't want to find, because you'll still be back here, is that there are pockets of greatness, that here's a classroom that is, here's a classroom that's not, and student outcomes are based on the class that they're put in. You want to calibrate UDL across the system. When you get to that calibration, then you're into full implementation. Okay? So, improvement team, that was one of the 5 frameworks. So our improvement team, there's a variety of stakeholders that have the correct expertise, knowledge, and skill. Parents and community members are also part of that conversation. That's where this book comes into play. How you communicate out. UDL, now think UDL. How we represent the information, how we allow for feedback, and how are we engaging our parents and community stakeholders. So this book is actually UDL for adults. Okay? Easy way to think of it. So just one last, what's the mindset of the team? That has to have a calibrated mindset so that there is an idea amongst the team that usable innovation is what we all want to do. We've decided on it. We've explored it. This is the way we're going. And there's actually research behind it. So in terms of implementation teams, if you have an organization that just likes to let things happen, there's 14% growth over 17 years. With an improvement team, with a focus on implementation science, you've got an 80% increase over 3 years. It's being mindful of the process. And there's a video that goes with it on the website where the researchers are talking about their experience. So it's very eye-opening. So the way that Swift looks at teams is that they're teams at all levels of the organization. So you've got the student and family, which is the purpose. You have the school, which is the place of the transformation. It's where the innovation is actually going to be implemented and make a difference. You have the district is the point of intervention. The district is what really sets up the drivers for the most part, the funding, the training, the resources, and then county, region, and state, sources of technical support. It's kind of why we're here today. Okay? So we also have these 4 stages, which is another one of the 5 frameworks. Okay, so these are the stages. Starting with exploration. Exploration is where you are doing the research. How are we going to choose the right intervention that is going to make a difference for our team? You're creating a readiness for change, and you're changing hearts and mind. Remember the change matrix? You're putting everything in place here. You're getting it in order. Because you know that change process is going to be really difficult when we get to initial implementation. Pay now or pay later. Do the work up front, or you're going to have some really angry people on the other end, and they're going to be resistant. So how you get them on board is a critical piece to this. And this is a great place to start. If you're familiar with Simon Sinek, he wrote a book called Start With Why. There's videos, got a website. But he really talks about starting with your core purpose, the reason why we do what we do. And typically we start with the what and the how. So this is your mission and vision. So the usable innovation comes into play here. When you're looking at exploration, you're exploring a usable innovation that will meet the needs of your students. You've identified what that need is. You have a problem statement. Now you got to find the thing that's going to fix it. That's your usable innovation. That's another one of the 5 frameworks. Innovations are, by definition, practices that are new to teachers, staff, and others. They're going to have grace in order to practice utilizing something new. So what you have in front of you is called the Hexagon Tool. It looks like this. And we're in the exploration stage and going through the process of determining which innovation you are going to choose. This is a way to help teams do that. So you're looking at 6 areas and you're looking at whether or not your organization, along with this innovation, is there a need? Is it a fit? Do we have the resources? Is there evidence that's reflective of our population? Are people ready? Have we prepared the readiness, or what do we need to do? And do we have the capacity? Not only do we have the capacity for teachers to implement, do we have the capacity, have we created the structures that support the teachers with building the capacity for implementation? What comes along with it, there's actually a whole packet that teams can go through and they can kind of grade themselves, which is on the website that I'll show you. You have this diagram, and then the other packet that you have are discussion questions based on these 6 areas. So there's specific questions you can ask the team around need, around fit. How does this innovation fit with other existing initiatives? Remember on that circle chart, there was that integrate? How does it integrate within? That's exactly what this is saying. So you're going to see comparisons between implementation contexts. There's also questions around resources, evidence, and readiness, and capacity. So really good questions that teams can go through to determine whether or not they have the capacity, the need, the fit, the resources, etc. So that's the exploration stage. You have that resource of the Hexagon tool. Once we've decided on that, then we're looking at installing. Installing is just that, putting structures in place. This is where the next, well, actually, before I go there, it's just developing communication pathways, ensuring that we have the financial resources, the human resources, identifying the specific practices to be used. Are we able to ensure that we have sustainable structures in place such that we don't have to give up once we get to initial implementation? In the installation stage, that's where our next of the 5 frameworks comes into play. Those structures that we're setting up, those are called drivers. We're putting the drivers in place in the installation stage before it ever gets rolled out. Any questions about that? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
What is the APD stand for?
I'm not going to tell you just now. We'll get there. She asked, what does the APDS stand for? That's actually the last framework that we're going to talk about. So the driver gets put in place, the structures are in place, we have a training plan, we have a coaching plan, we have the right people in the right place, we have our administrative facilitation put in place, we have our leadership put in place. Everything is exactly how we want it to be. Then we're going to figure out, what does it look like when we actually put it in place? Because this is where the uncomfortable piece happens, because now people are going to experience, and they're either going to accept or reject. And if you do that work up front, get everybody on board, you're going to have an easier implementation. Oops. So this is just a definition of what drivers are. Drivers are usually fairly confusing to people. So we're looking at the leadership drivers. The leadership drivers involve technical and adaptive leadership responses. Technical is pretty much, it's an easy decision to make. Time. You have a finite amount of time. How do you make a schedule? Inclusive schedule, high school schedule, what does that look like? Funding. You have limited resources. How do you use it? So you're making very specific decisions as a leader. But the adaptive are a little bit more different and difficult. What about the motivation of our staff? How do you create the motivation? Different way to respond from a leadership perspective. And innovation inertia. How do you get that innovation moving? But then we also have the selection process. So these are competency drivers. Staff attitudes, receptivity to training, not my job. Okay? Do we have the right people in our hiring practices? Have we selected the right people to actually be part of this first test of change? In terms of training in the innovation, knowledge, beliefs, and usefulness. If we stop at training, we are not going to have the benefit and the results if it's a one and done. So we have to go beyond training. How do we actually get into the classrooms to make sure that there are accountability measures? What does the support look like after the training? Do we have ongoing coaching in the classroom when they're actually using and practicing with that innovation? Is there a comfort level, and what is the rapport? Then we move over to organizational drivers. These are actually student information systems, and then your special ed, SACE. How are we collecting the data to make sure that we're making the right decisions? Facilitative administration, how do we look at our time? How do we look at our caseloads? Think about scheduling. And then systems intervention, how do we manage all of this change from an organizational perspective, vertically and horizontally? And then how do we make sure that we have fidelity? What is the accountability practice in place? Is there consistent use, and do we have reliable benefit? So we have to keep reassessing. Which leads us to the initial implementation stage. This is where people are fearful. They're upset, potentially, and how you've managed that change up to this point is going to be a critical component. You have to learn from your mistakes and celebrate your progress. Attempt to implement new practices effectively may end. This could be the ending point. Once a word of mouth spreads, hopefully it's positive. And this is how you make systemic changes. So this is a key component. In education, what we tend to skip, we'll do a great job of exploration. What we tend to skip is this one. We want to roll that sucker out, right? So here's initial implementation. We usually skip and come right here. Full implementation across the system. So components are integrated. They're fully functioning. Skillful practices by the frontline staff. Changes in policy. Don't forget that there have to be policy changes that are reflected in practice at all levels. My other favorite quote. There you go. So there was a question, what does the APDS mean? Really, really good question, because this is how we create that inertia. This is how we move from stage to stage to stage. Notice the arrows. Okay? It's not linear. So the one thing that we haven't talked about is that you will be going exploration to installation, back to exploration, up to initial implementation. It's not a linear process when we talk about implementation science. So the P, plan. We're going to plan for the change. Okay? And then we're going to do. We're going to carry it out. We're going to study the results. And then we're going to act. And when I say act, it could be that we're going to adopt, we're going to adapt, or we're going to abandon. Okay? So that's how we go. The PDSA cycle is the continuous improvement cycle that moves us this way. So you're going through the exploration stage here, deciding what innovation you want to use, right? And then you found it, and then you're going to install all of the structures, and you're going to see how you're doing. You're going to monitor it. You might find we don't have the resources. We better find another innovation. We'll move forward. Now we've got it. We've installed. Now we're going to roll it out. PDSA, we're going to see what happens. And then we're going to move into full implementation. So we keep moving forward, backwards, until we get it right. And the frustrating piece to this is it takes a while. And people will give up. And that's where we get the pendulum swing. Okay? And it's regardless of the personnel, the staff, come and go all the time. If it's led by one person, it'll go with that person when they leave. So just a couple of resources. I mentioned NIRN, N-I-R-N. They have amazing resources. The problem is they have a ton of amazing resources. So this is on the Padlet. It's called a quick reference guide. And what it does, it takes all of their resources and it breaks it down into those 5 frameworks. So anything you wanted to know about drivers, there's a whole section on drivers. Click and it'll take you to the website, to that actual resource. And it just looks like this. Here's an overview. These are all the overview resources. And then implementation drivers. Here's all your resources. And then it does continuous improvement cycles and stages, gives you everything you need. Otherwise, you're all over that website. is hard to understand. So that is, to me, the most amazing resource. We have time? Probably not. This is something you can watch on your own. It's amazing. I love him. This is Drew Dudley, and he talks about leadership moments happen every day, all day long. We just don't recognize them. So everyday leadership, it's also the popsicle video. So he uses popsicles as an example. So leadership is important. Teams are important, and understanding implementation science before you roll out your innovation like UDL is critical. Otherwise, it's going to fail, and we're going to blame the innovation instead of really looking at how we plan for the innovation. So there you have it. There you go. Thanks so much for your attention. I appreciate it. And don't forget to fill out your evaluations. I cannot let you leave without them. And I think if you're online, make sure you fill out the evaluations also. So thank you. Thank you. You're welcome.